Hey guys, this is Timothy Roberts. Welcome to the Reverie podcast. Today I have Mariano Quijano. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right, sweet. So Mariano, you just told me that your website is officially live. You've been working on this new website, and as of like 30 minutes ago, it's up and ready to be viewed. Correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. So I recently redid my website and got things kind of dialed in, and it's always nice when you just hit publish and it's up.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work getting it the way you want it and all that kind of stuff. So
that is absolutely right.
Relief.
Definitely. I went to work this Wednesday with like 3 hours of sleep on me. I almost missed my train just because of like being unable to decide on a couple of words here and there about how they sound, if they are correct or not. So yeah, and then obviously editing. I have no previous experience with I have very faint previous experience with recording, but never to the point that I had to do it on my own and that I had to use these new programs that I haven't used before. So a lot of the week was also spent editing the videos for the cymbals themselves that are going on the website. So yeah, it's live.
So where can people find this website? Well, I will plug it at the end, obviously, but like where?
For sure, it's Quijano Cymbals. It's literally the name of my workshop, QuijanoCymbals.com, and that should get you there. Yeah.
Sweet. So Mariano, give me a little backstory of who you are, how you started in this. Did you come from a player's perspective and slowly morph into a maker? You know, what has been your journey becoming a cymbalsmith?
Definitely. I do feel like we almost all of us share the same background. I don't know of any smith that is not a drummer at the same time, right? Like we all start there and end up here. I'm a drummer. I'm a musician. I started playing music around 11, 12 years old. I have always really loved the idea of making things, of playing around with stuff. My mother is a sculptress, between many other things that she's. So there was a tiny workshop at my house when I was growing up, with bits of wood, bits of clay, bits of wire for making the skeleton underneath the actual sculpture, etc. I did make is a very big word. I did mod my first drums because, as most drummers, I'm assuming as well, especially if you're not from the US, if you're from outside the US, you enter other genres before you go into jazz. I ended up going into jazz, but I started listening to rock and listening to heavy metal and prog rock and all of the things that you do as a teenager, I would say. And my first drums were like a Pearl Forum drums, like big. I don't remember if it was 22 or 24 inch, but it was a big bass drum. And it was not even wood. It was like this, I don't know how to call it. It was like, imagine sawdust with glue, like squished into a small and made into a shell. That is what the material looked like. And I had like a 16-inch floor tom and other stuff. And little by little, when I was 19, and I was like, you know what? Jazz is a thing. I started to shift around that age. I modded that drum set to be my jazz kit, and I had a blast with it. I remember like the pleasure of making things with my hands has always been a part of myself, but I went for music, and I'm very stubborn, and I dedicated the last 10 years to being a musician. I moved around the world, and then I did also try to hammer a cymbal when I was a bit younger, which I still have here, which I'm very lucky to do, because when my family moved out of Venezuela, we kind of left a lot of things behind, and we were able to recover a couple of things like a couple of years ago, and that cymbal was there. My first ever hammered cymbal. I was like 19 or 20, I don't remember. I knew I was leaving Venezuela. I knew that I wasn't taking that one. I said, you know what, let's hammer it. And I went and did it, and it's not good, as you might imagine.
It's a relic of where you came from. I have some similar ones that I will never let go of because of that same reason.
it's like a Bosphorus. I know now why it's deformed, but I had no idea when I was doing it. I was actually hammering against wood, and it wasn't even hard wood. It was soft wood when I was doing it back in Venezuela. No clue about what I was doing. But yeah, that kind of like left the seed in there, you know, like I met drum makers in Venezuela. I always been enamored with the idea of making things with your hands. I just never had either the time or the money or the, I don't know if I would say guts or not exactly know what, but it was just like a life goal idea that was behind me in the very back of my brain while I was trying to make it into being a musician. And when I was 29, I went to Colombia, and in Colombia, through a friend of mine, her name is Marcela, which I appreciate very dearly, I was able to get into contact with these guys at Muisca, which is was a very kind of like starting cymbal factory in Colombia. I don't know how many cymbal factories there are in South America. I think there's a couple in Brazil. I know that Orion is in Brazil. I know that obviously Domine, but I don't know if we can call Domine a cymbal factory, since he calls himself an independent still, you know, like I do know he has employees, and he's a provider for blanks in South America, and there's nobody else doing like real V20 blanks other than him. But yeah, Muisca is one of the few ones around there, and I was very lucky to enter the company, and I worked with them for 2 years, and that is kind of how I got my foot into it. Because as you might know, well, as you definitely know, to get into this, you have to either have a good amount of money saved to be able to like afford a couple of years of ruining blanks without much knowledge, or just be lucky enough to be somehow trained by somebody else. I was on the second group. I was trained by somebody else. That is how I get here.
Yeah,
I do have the background. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was for me it was like the stars aligned, because I was cutting up cracked cymbals to make accessories, and you can get those for really cheap, and that was my first material to work with. So it kind of happened into an easier way to do it cheap, and then I started like testing out the techniques on nice cymbals, and then started ruining those, and then I did hundreds of modifications before I ever touched a blank. So it's like it is true that if you just like just dive right in and you start hammering on blanks, you're going to be ruining quite a few before you start actually coming out with something that's decent.
But even more than ruining, I feel like, you're going to ruin a couple for sure, more than a couple. If you're lucky and you are not afraid of a hammer, which is another thing that I saw, because I had to train the guy that was going to replace me when I left Colombia. When I left the factory, they asked me to train the guy that was coming in. And I mean, and I don't mean afraid in the sense of like afraid of the tool itself, because it's a harmless tool. I mean afraid of the idea that of the power that the hammer has towards the blank, and how easy it is to like give a couple of bad hits and have a blank deformed, or have an overstretched patch or whatever, you know. So that fear, if you are lucky enough to be starting by yourself without previous training, and going in with like, here are my savings, let's go for it. If you have that fear of like anything that I might be doing might be getting me farther away from where this is a acceptable instrument, that is also a big hindering towards it's not only about ruining them, it's about this confidence that you get after a while, after you get to know the material. And also like saying, okay, I did this one, right? This one, after the 5th, 6th, 7th, 10th attempt, this one works. Now, why?
Yeah. And then unpicking that. I'm interested in that the fear of the tool and of the work. And then you said confidence. So you're right that it is about, it's like learning the material, how the material responds. I think about this. There's this one time I used to be totally into Bosphorus. That was my company. I bought a ton of Bosphorus cymbals, and they were all super thin and wobbly, and those were my prized possessions. And one time I had my hi-hat set behind me, and I stood up from the drum set, and I like stepped on one of the hi-hats, and it flipped the hi-hat inside out, and it like jumped off the ground and landed, popped back into shape. And I was like so afraid. I like looked over it like I was thinking there would be a crack, and I swore that I like did something to ruin it, because I was like, a cymbal doesn't flip inside out. Like I destroyed it. It's gonna crack. It's ruined forever. And so you when you're not familiar with the material, you don't know what the bronze does, what the bronze is meant to do. There is quite a bit of fear there. So yeah, talk to me about like the process of becoming confident, and like tell me a little bit about your philosophy with cymbal making, and how to work bronze. Like you could take that question however you want.
All right.
But
well, I had no idea that we were going to speak about confidence, but I like it because that also allows me to speak a bit more about the factory itself, where I learned. Because for me, well, first of all, I was very determined when I came into Muisca. I knew that I was coming in for the only purpose of getting out with knowledge and setting up my own little workshop. You know, there was no doubt in my mind. It was, as I told you, a plan that had been in my head for quite a while. So even when I signed the contract with them, it was all very lucky. I went to them as a supposed customer. I got a little how you call it, business card from the sister of the owner of the place. I sent them a mail with like my CV and a letter explaining who I was and why I told them, don't hire me. I told them I was going to, I'll make coffee, drive around, look for whatever you need to buy from this place or the other, clean the space, whatever I need to do. Don't hire me. I don't want money. I want to be there. And if you will exchange a tiny bit of knowledge for whatever you need in the factory, I'll do it. And they were like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's pretty strange. No, thank you. If we need you, we'll let you know. At the moment, we're fine. Like 3 weeks later, the third cymbals meet that they had broke his finger. And he was like, I'm out. And they had an opening. Suddenly, a guy that they didn't know anything about had their CV with them. Let's call him out. And that is how I entered. And when I signed the contract with them, I told Fabian, the owner, listen, I'm not going to sign this contract if this is not okay with you, but I need you to know that I'm coming in here and my plan is to make my own workshop once I leave. And he was like, absolutely, don't worry about it. Go for it. And he is a person that as I told you, I really have a lot of appreciation for. In any case, going back to confidence, I did have this preset confidence of like, I need to come here and I need to learn this and I need to get good at it, because from here on, this is going to be like something that it's going to determine in a way my livelihood. And it was that important for me. But I also had a very lucky situation of having other two guys in front of me every day doing the same thing. So whenever I was afraid of like, am I hitting too hard? I just look up and there's a guy like hammering like a freaking bear. And okay, it can hold that amount of strength. I am not going to fuck it up for sure.
Yeah, right.
Then at any point that it was, for example, it bent too, I was hammering maybe too much on the underneath part. And I wasn't very much aware of how to like control the curve a tiny bit more. So I was afraid, okay, it is going too far. I'm fucking it up. And then I'm looking up and I see the guy with a really bent one, hammering on the top, putting it back in place. So again, I had this confidence that not only came from me, but came from seeing people in front of me doing the thing without much, not care. It's not about, because they did care about it, without much holding back.
Yeah.
So that gave me the confidence as well to like go fast. And also like, it's a factory. You need to, you need to produce in a way. Like the main goal of the factory wasn't to make the most unique, pristine cymbal, which they were doing really good work. I am very proud of the sound that they were able to achieve during those 2 years when I was there. But their main goal, as any other factory, is to put out things, sell them, marketing, grow the company. Simple as that. So I also had to be able to do that. And that is where that confidence came from, in the sense that I was able to learn without feeling that I was ruining things. You know? Yeah,
that's amazing. And I think that's an interesting balance point, because we could definitely talk about mass manufactured cymbals and kind of the state of big cymbal in the world, and how things are kind of shifting in an interesting way, and how there's a lot of independent guys now. and there's more of a spotlight on the independents now than there ever has been, because there's more of us, and you got guys like Paul Francis that are now doing the independent thing. But as independents, I think for me, one of my big struggles, because I had a company, obviously I started building drums first, and then I started building percussion accessories first. So I did have that idea of, you've got to produce, you've got to finish up a product and sell it. And you can over obsess over one product and try to make it perfect. But then at a certain point that doesn't serve you well, because you've got to sell the things and you want to get your price point down and all that. But when I started making cymbals, I had my other companies running. So the cymbal making thing was a total passion project at first. It was like, I just want to see if I can do this. I've been modifying cymbals for years, and that business was established and guys were sending them in, but I always felt like I had like a lack of that understanding of, well, what does it take to make a cymbal from scratch? I didn't know that. And so it started out as a passion project, and it started out as a way to just inform me so I could modify cymbals better. I could do a better job at that. And then I started, and I was like, this is all I ever want to do. Kind of like you. It's like, this is all I want to do for the rest of my life. I will swing a hammer as long as I can swing a hammer, until my wrists give out, my arms give out. And I think at the beginning making cymbals, I spent so much time obsessing over it, making it exactly like I wanted it to be. And then as I grew, I started realizing there's a beauty in kind of letting go and letting the piece just be what it is, and not over obsessing, because it's easy to take things past the point you intended, and so this idea of like, you've got a company where you're trying to produce and sell, get the stuff out the door, and then you've got this artisanal side. And I'm in a place where I'm trying to balance those two and trying to live between them, because I can't spend 20 hours on one cymbal, because I will lose money, when I sell it. So talk to me a little bit about that. So you're out of the factory environment, and you're making cymbals. You're making whatever you want to make. So what's your philosophy with the cymbals that you make? Given the artisanal side of being an independent maker, but also the side that's like, you want this to be your livelihood. It's got to put food on the table for you.
Well, that is probably the part in which I'm going to be, to whoever might be listening to this that has any clue about business, I might sound like the most ignorant person that probably is. I'll be absolutely honest. I don't know if I can speak about a philosophy itself rather than a vision of how I see myself and what I see myself doing. I somehow don't know why, but I'm a person that hasn't had this ambition of growth in most of my life. I am very content with little. I don't know if it had to do with where I grew up. I don't know exactly what it is. I grew up in a very bizarre environment, but I do not see myself making more cymbals. I do not see myself starting with, let's say that I can do now a month. If I was working only at making cymbals, which I am not at the moment, but if I was doing that, I could do 20 cymbals that I would be happy in a month, right? Mm-hmm. I do not see myself growing further than that. If with 20 cymbals a month, I can be happy, I can pay for the rent of the space or whatever space I'm moving to. I would like to have a space a bit bigger than this one. I would like to have like a space for photography. I would like to have maybe a space for inking and stamping, and definitely a separate room for patina, because it's not good when you are doing everything on the same 20 square meter space.
Oh yeah. Gotta wear that respirator, man. Gotta wear that respirator.
I was so in love with the smell of this place, because this place is relatively new. It's I've been here since April this year, And everything that I have done, I've done it with wood because it's a cheaper option. My lathe is made with wood, not with metal, etc. And it smelled so good
Yeah.
until I went and did
Yeah.
patina for 20 cymbals, and now
Yeah.
it doesn't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in any case, going back to the idea of what I do, how I do it in my philosophy, I somehow, if I can just come to this workshop, sit down with a blank, work on it until I feel like I'm doing something that makes me feel proud of it, that pleasures my idea of sonic behavior, and do just enough to be able to live a normal life, I'll be happy. So I don't come in here with with crazy goals. My goals are very simple, I guess. My goals are at the moment are very, very small. And I don't know if when I accomplish those goals, maybe something will happen and flap, I would like now more. Yeah, might happen. Who knows?
Yeah.
How the nature of humans. But then my philosophy revolves around that. When it comes to making cymbals, my philosophy is I don't want to emulate. I don't want to clone. I want to do. I want to somehow learn. I want every blank that I do to allow me to be closer to something that I don't know what it is, but to that, like, and yeah, that is pretty much the philosophy at the moment, making, to my ears, pretty sounding cymbals. And that's another thing that is complex, because then you go to the audience, right? And and how do people perceive it? Like, my ears are my own ears, and it's pretty for me, not pretty for them. And that is where I've encountered a lot of I don't know how to put it, like conflict, I would say, inside my head, inside my own, because I could be very like, who gives a fuck, and I'll do my thing and somebody would like it. But I have a hard time being just that. And I've definitely have moved my cymbals around. I've been very active in trying to get people to know me. Nobody had, like, I don't know how to manage social media very well at the moment. I'm new to it in that sense. So I'm trying my best to copy the guys that are doing it right, like you, for example, on Instagram and stuff like that. But that hasn't brought many fruits. So I thought to myself, you know what? To the streets, grab my stuff, go to the jam sessions. I am a very good friend of many of the drummers around here. So I call them up. You have a jam session around anytime soon? Yes. Would you like to play my cymbals? Yes. Cool. I bring him 8 cymbals. Choose the one you want. Play them out. During the jam session, I come to the stage not to play, to change cymbals and put other ones, so that whatever kid moves around comes and plays those cymbals himself. And I've been doing that. I'm on like the 6th jam session at the moment, I think, that I've been doing that. And the outcome of people's perception on it, it is so linked to how the industry moves nowadays. And I am not like the industry moves nowadays. I feel like the industry is generally moving towards very dry, very lightweight cymbals. And that is how people perceive good sound nowadays. And anything that doesn't match lightweight, dry, it's like, ooh, not for me, uncontrollable, I can take it. And I understand that for sure, control is a very important part of a cymbal's characteristics. But then the conflict comes into my head. Is it a thing of perception? Is it a thing of the industry? Are my cymbals not controlled enough? And I go crazy, and I spend 2 more extra months on a cymbal that I shouldn't. Literally,
man,
the batch that people will see online now, the I don't know, I placed 15 cymbals. I still have like 1, 2. I have 3 more cymbals that I haven't placed on the website at the moment. It's been like 4 months of work on 15 cymbals. So yeah,
man, there's so much in what you said. There's so much I want to pick up on. First, I'll say I love the philosophy, because you basically said I don't have a philosophy, and then you said your philosophy. It's like the anti-philosophy. It's like most companies are like, well, our vision is to grow the company and get it to this point and da 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 da. But what I heard in what you said was, my philosophy is to make cymbals I'm proud of, and just do enough to
Yeah.
take care of myself. You know, I don't know if you're married or have a family but just take care of me and the people I'm in charge of or whatever it
Yeah.
is. I think that's an amazing philosophy. I think that's kind of, in a way, I feel like that's how I started with my company, the drum company 7 years ago. Was like, I had no ambition, in terms of, I had ambition, but it was a different kind of ambition than maybe the more Western capitalist consumerist kind of ambition of grow, make profit, sell, get bigger, you know, all of that. And I think that philosophy works. I think it works to, when you come at it from an honest place. And, you know, I've never claimed to be the best or make the best stuff, because I think that's a stupid question. It's like saying, like someone claiming to be the best drummer. It's like, what does that even mean for you to be the best drummer? There are thousands of drummers throughout history that have focused on different areas of music. And so it's a spectrum. It's this wide thing. So it's like being the best is kind of a stupid aim in a sense, because it's like, why are you just, is it for pride's sake that you want to be the best? Or do you want to just discover, like you said, like discover what is inside of you, discover what you don't know? I think even if that, you could maybe boil down a philosophy to that. My philosophy is to discover what I don't know. I would say that about myself. Like that to me is like what this whole cymbal experiment is.
In fact, absolutely correct, to the point that I would say my philosophy, it's almost like a philosophy that is not centered on the cymbal making thing. It could be cymbals making, it could be drum making, it could be making furniture. For me, like the idea is, first of all, I want to be, I don't know if happy is the right word. I want to be in serenity with my surroundings and with myself. And I want to find an activity that allows me to do that while also sustaining myself in the world in which we live nowadays. It just so happens that I'm a musician, I'm a drummer. I've been in love with drums for the last 20-something years of my life. I've obsessed with cymbals forever, because I think all of us have the same idea that drums somehow are easy to modify, easy to change the sound of. They are, if it's not the head, it's whatever you put on the head. It's the tension of the head. It's you name it. You can do whatever you want with a drum set and kind of like move it around to sound different. Well, a cymbal, it's kind of what it is. You know, it's there. It's like this mysterious like chunk of metal that is unmovable in a way. It is movable now that we do what we do, we know it. But for the drummer, it's like kind of not. Either you put like a rivet on it or something to dampen it up, or that's it. That's what the cymbal, it has like a spirit to it. So we are all very much in, I feel like we're all very, very much in love with these instruments, and I am in love with them. And I also love making them. And I love very much, like, I think the feeling of, all right, after a month and a half of you, I see you, I have you in my hands, I put you on the drum set, you sound like, not like I want to, but you sound to a way that makes me feel good of how you sound. You go to the shelf. That in itself, for me, it's so rewarding that my ambition is not an ambition of growth. It's an ambition of almost like knowledge. It's an ambition of trying to understand why this one made me feel good and how to not replicate it, but how to understand the parameters that were good and how to play with those parameters better for the next time that I would want to do another one. That for the next time, if I have a person that comes to me and says, I would like this and this and that, in my brain already like a bunch of little connections made themselves so that I could be better at realizing that person's idea. So that is my ambition. That is my philosophy in a way. So it's kind of apart from the business itself. And and if I can do it with this, I'll be so happy, you know?
It's a lot of it. It feels a little bit like I notice when I look at the world of like bigger companies and the world of artisanal makers and how they sort of operate separate from one another, and they operate like the artisanal guys, that they typically aren't good at business. And then the companies are like good at business, but terrible at making inspiring instruments. And they live separate. And I am trying to take the approach, and I'm seeing other artisans make this approach of, well, what about both? What about like become good enough at business so know you're not like, you're not like undercutting yourself or not presenting your product properly or all those kinds of things. But at the same point, not having that supersede or not having that overshadow the important thing, which is what we're talking about with trying to not replicate cymbals or make a cymbal that's perfect, but make a cymbal that feels inspiring. So you play it and you almost disconnect from it as a maker, and you kind of go, it is what it wants to be. And it will hopefully inspire some other drummer to make music on it. And it's like this idea of kind of, it feels hard to define because we're trying to live between this world of total pure inspiration and a company that is making a product and wanting, we want to be able to, when someone comes to us and says, hey, I got this idea, I want to do this, this, and this, can you do that? We want to be able to execute it. So it's like living in that world, and also the world of like, sit down with a piece of metal and just go where you feel like going and make something that, and it is what it is. It has no preconceived notion, no, it has to be this way, or I want it to be this exact gram weight. It's going to turn out to be whatever it's going to turn out to be, and kind of like those two different approaches, and trying to find a place where you can be true to yourself as an artisan, but also have the tools to execute. I find that that's like that is the goal for me, at least. And that's like the aim. That's where I want to head. And I know that every time I sit down with a piece of metal and I just go and it becomes what it becomes, those to me can be the most inspiring pieces. I don't know if it's the same for you. Like,
for me, it's as anything that I do, I guess it's a bit of like a love-hate relationship. It takes me a while to learn to love before I hate all of what I do. It's always me trying to get to the point where I convince myself that was all right. It's almost like it always starts and it's never satisfying. It's never, I start making a cymbal and I think that I finish it and it's not satisfying, and it doesn't make me feel like it's something good what I did. So I continue to work on it. And so what I've been doing now is that it's not that I've been working in smaller increments. It's more than I've been more careful as to how much I do at a certain pace, so that I always give myself enough space afterwards in case I don't like it, which I know might be a very big possibility. So I'm always now on these later cymbals that I've been making, I'm working that way. I'm working like always leave a space for the rest. Since I don't know, I have this personality where it takes me a while to really like the outcome or the end result of something. So I twitch and twitch and twitch and twitch. And
so you like to give yourself a time. Are you saying you give yourself time to decide what you think about it? Like give yourself space?
Time is important for sure. And not only time, but the ear changes. Like that is one of the things that I think that is probably the biggest challenge, how you come one day and your ear kind of like does something and the next day it does something absolutely different.
Yeah.
And I am absolutely sure it is the ear, because the cymbals had been rested for like over 5 days already. Like the material has already settled up at that point. And my ears are different. So time is important for sure for many days of playing them. So like the thing that people don't know is like making cymbals, at least for me, I don't know, I guess for many others as well, is not only like the process of hammering it out, giving the shape, lathing it, giving a finish, deciding if you want patina or not patina, deciding whatever you want. It's also the countless hours of playing it until you feel like, yes, that is how it should be sounding. And At least for me, like whatever I have here, if whatever people are gonna take, if they take, they'll know I've been playing them for a good 4 months already, just to I guess understand them and be content with them, and happy and proud of what I've done. But yeah, that's, and not only time but also material. That's the other thing that I've been giving myself. So we know pretty much that there's a certain point to where it's like a no-go, no, not going back kind of zone, you know. And so now I order heavy blanks, not entirely. But I've been ordering heavier than I was ordering originally, not because of the sound itself, but the sound also, it's part of it. I did wanted to experiment with heavier blanks, see how they behave. I work with heavier blanks mostly in Colombia, by the way. We were working with, like, I think there was no right blank that was below 3 kilos in Bogota. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So I know how they feel, but I didn't know how they felt if I wanted to aim them towards a more complex cymbal, a more nuanced cymbal than what we were doing over there. So I also think that material, for me particularly, is important to always know that I have a bit more material to play with, so that if I have to lathe a tiny bit more, that I can harden that material a bit more afterwards as well, so that if I don't get to a 1900 grams blank, that I cannot do anything with afterwards, because it's like paper in it. There's nothing else to do with it. So that also I give myself time and material to try to remediate the way that my brain and my ears work.
I really connect with that idea that our perception changes in the process of making these. And I mean, we probably, for anyone listening that's not a maker, we probably can connect with this idea as a player, where we like our cymbals when we first hear them, and then we take them to some different rooms, or we have them for a year, and then all of a sudden we're like, I don't really like this as much. And part of that can be our tastes and our preferences changing. But the perception, even of just our own ears hearing it, I mean, it's wild how I'll have a long day of hammering. I'll be testing cymbals out all day, and my ears get so tired. And by the end of the day, I'm hitting a cymbal going, that sounds like garbage. And then I get frustrated, and I leave work. I go up and I watch a TV show or whatever. And then I go to bed, come back into the shop the next day, and I hit that cymbal. And I go, oh, that sounds great, actually. And I'm like, it was like all I needed was rest. All I needed was a break. Yeah. And then that, you factor in the different surfaces in the room that you're in, and how those surfaces are reflecting the sound. You take into account stick choice. You take into account, there's so many different things. And I think that's why it can be so, it can be a thing to easily obsess over, is because it's not simple. Like it is what it is, like you said, but, and it's so complex in its, what the sound it puts off, and it can't really be modified. I mean, apart from a cymbal smith who can actually lathe it again or hammer it again, but it is what it is. And that to me is just like, how do I capture the most inspiring sound out of this piece of material? Cheap drum sets. I mean, this is probably undercutting what I do a little bit, but cheap drum sets, you can make those sound good. You can take a drum kit that's $400 and you can make it sound great. You can play gigs on it and record with it, and it can do the job for you. Cymbals aren't that way. You know, you can't take, I mean, relative, you know, there's always room in this conversation, but you can't take a Sabian B8 rock ride or whatever, and then go play like a really quiet jazz gig in a room full of brick and have it sound nice. Yeah. Unless you've got amazing technique. Yeah. Maybe you could pull a sound out of it that works, but it's the perception. I deal a lot in just thinking about, I think about perception all the time. I don't know. I feel like it's one of the most important things to being a cymbalsmith is like, yeah, your perspective, and you're making this thing to be heard from 50 different positions. Like you've got the audience perspective, you got the engineer perspective, you got the other band members, their perspective, you got the drummer perspective, and you're trying to balance all of these things to create an instrument that's inspiring for the player, that works in the music, that's going to speak clear enough. You talked about the industry move is like dry, thin cymbals, like the Meinl thing. Those don't inspire me because I put my hands on those and they're just, they feel like dead. Although I know if I was to put that in a really loud room full of brick, it might sound wonderful.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to think about. There's so much.
They sound empty to me. I wouldn't even call them dead. They somehow there's this feeling to me of like emptiness when I hear them. I don't know if it's like a frequency spectrum thing where like as the attack is so up the highs and so fast that somehow a big chunk of the vibrations that you're used to hearing just dies out, and it just makes you feel emptiness somehow.
Yeah.
It is functional. It is very functional. It is very accurate and precise and pristine. But I don't like empty things. I realized that I like tone very much.
Yeah.
I love tone. Something that has tone behind it. I'm down. I like hearing how things vibrate, and cymbals are pieces of metal that vibrate all over the spectrum of frequencies. They don't vibrate only here or there. They do like a big wide thing. So
I take that exact same point, and the way I think of it is like shallowness versus depth. So like there's a shallowness, and empty would be another way of saying it, I think, but like shallowness where it's like you have it just feels like it lacks body. It's got like maybe a low kind of like low frequency wash, and then it's got the stick, and then it's gone. Whereas like the idea of depth, wide, full, this idea that there could be lows down here, life in the middle, the mid frequencies, and then the high frequencies are cutting. So it's almost like a high definition like a high definition video versus like a like 320 video where you almost see the graininess of it.
Yeah.
Versus the high def, it's like you have this it's sharp and full and rich and deep. And a lot of, I think most modern manufactured cymbals from big companies have this sort of like shallow, hollow thing, because you kind of they have to make thousands of cymbals, thousands. Paul told me on this podcast that he lathed personally 500,000 cymbals.
I heard
500,000.
It's absurd. It's crazy. That's so much.
I can't fathom that when you're like, the most I could ever lathe in a day is like maybe 15. If they've been hammered, I could lathe 15 cymbals in a day, and that would be like a long day.
I remember like in the factory, it was kind of like that. In the factory, we didn't have an insane output. I'll be honest. I think we were doing around 100 cymbals every 2 months or so, kind of. Yeah. And we were only 3 smiths, people on the plant, let's call it, on the floor working, doing everything from lathing to hammering to smelting. And I remember like moments of like feeling proud of like, okay, guys, we did it. We hammered X amount, and we're able to lathe the 14 of them in one day. And while I was lathing, you guys were hammering, and so we like made it a bit more efficacious in the way that the flow of work was happening. And for us, like 14 was like, good day of work. 500,000 is
500,000.
It's another,
and that that's obviously Zildjian's like in some ways, I wouldn't call them top dog because there's a lot of other factors, but they're the most established company, and then second is probably Sabian, maybe Peisty, but like they're a juggernaut, huge. So, obviously they're going to be dealing in massive numbers, but all factory settings, there's a quantity thing. And so the quality has to suffer. Like you can't, that's why artisanal and factory kind of exist separate from each other. Sorry, I got a little thing in my throat.
Don't worry. All good.
So with that, I think that trends in the industry are going to lean towards the shallow, like whatever can be made easier and cheaper. And so we're gonna because those marketing agencies are gonna come in.
I am not sure about that. I think the industry moves. I mean, again, I might sound like an absolute Dumbo, but like, because I don't know anything about business. I really don't. I've been trying to stay as far away as I can from that world for most of my life. I think a big reason for which I chose music was exactly a bit of
The
like
opposite.
yeah, I couldn't anything think not my kind of deal. But I have a feeling that I've been thinking about this lately, that the whole process of recording and how we hear music nowadays has an impact in how we expect music to sound when we have it in front of us. And somehow I feel like this idea for going for drier and lighter cymbals is because when we hear whatever record album we're listening to overheads capturing the top part of a cymbal that have a lot of probably work done to them, and they sound much drier and with way less of its natural tone and wash than they would if you play them right in front of you.
So it's a pre-processed. It's pre-processed cymbals.
Exactly. It's a cymbal that doesn't.
Yeah.
There you go. That are lacking the room. That are lacking the resonance, the comeback of the weight. That are lacking absolutely everything that are presented to you in a way in which they sound for sure is the sound of a cymbal, but it is not it is not what you will get if you sit down in front of it and play it, right? And we listen to these records that sound fantastic, and we have these sounds in our head of how we want to sound as well. And we are expecting that for whatever is in front of us. So I feel like the industry has been shifting into like more drier and less full cymbals because the records sound like that. And that is what I think. And I guarantee you that if whatever record you're thinking of, you sat down on that drum set to play them, you would not think that those were the things that you were listening to as you had them on your headphones, which also affects how you hear them. It's on the headphone. It's not on an actual, like, it's right here. It's not coming from this direction. Directionality also, like, it's crazy. So all of the things that we've had to think about when we think about making a freaking cymbal, right? Like, you were speaking about something that I wanted to say. You said something about perception. How do you think a lot about perception? And again, things that people might not think about when they know that they are getting a cymbal made by a cymbalsmith. But a lot of the work as well is almost like ear training work. It's the same thing that you would do if you go to music school to learn how to, like, whatever, how you call it, dictate or like
transcribe or
transcribing, all of these things. You kind of are doing the same. And I had this thing, like, over the past, I think now I am getting a bit over it, so I'm happy about that. But like over the past 2 months or so, I actually started to ask friends of mine that had cymbals to let me go and play their cymbals, or to let me go with my cymbals to their places and put mine next to them, because I felt like I had stopped understanding context. Like the idea of dry or washy was left my head, because for the past 6 months, I've been listening only to what I'm doing. Constantly, every day. If I'm not working at my other job, I'm here listening to the things I'm doing. So context somehow leaves I stop understanding what I'm listening to if I don't have an anchor. So I know for sure that one thing I'm going to do as this grows is get a library of cymbals that are not mine to always have with me as anchoring points.
That's
I understand mine better.
That's great. Modifications are great for that too. Like if you want to develop that as a part of your business and have that, because it's like constant cymbals coming in. And I know my perspective, I'm getting the cymbals people don't like. They want them changed, obviously. So they're not the best of the best, but it's at least giving me a reference point, which I've never thought about that until you just said that. It's like having a reference point for what the industry is producing. so that, I mean, in a sense, I think there's a real value in kind of saying screw it to like whatever the industry is doing, and just do what makes you happy and do what makes you inspired. And then just if people like it, great. If they don't, they can find something else. There's plenty of options. I think there's benefit to that, but then also knowing, like you said, knowing what is the industry's version of dry? What is the industry's version of washi? How does that compare to what I think is dry or what I think is washi? I liked what you said about, the industry does. It is true that like there's a sense of this whole dry thing that the industry is doing, dry and trashy and complex. It's about pre-processing those cymbals so that they sound in front of you the way they sound on the records, and I think another factor to add to that is that they are also realizing that the dry, trashy thing is easier in a sense to produce from a factory standpoint. There's not a ton of a need to like really balance the tension. I get a lot of minals in for modifications, and they're not trying to throw any shade. It's just kind of the way they have it set up. But like those cymbals are, most of them, very out of balance tension wise. They're over processed up near the bell, so they dip. They've got tons of little soft spots. You can flip them inside out super easy. And it's because like, with that crust is going to hinder, to at least some extent, some hums that would pop off if it was fully lathed. So it's like, they know they can kind of like get away with like, just, slap this method, do it on 100 of them and send it out the door. And it's good enough, and I'll get those in for modifications. And it's like, it's got a weird hum, or it's got, this kind of like mushy feel. And it's like, I like pull it out of the box. I know instantly what's going on with it. It's like, this is that thing where like on one side, they're processing the cymbals to sound like records. On the other side, they've also realized they can make more money producing that kind of cymbal, because there's not, and I don't have any evidence to support that, other than like, I know how much more work it takes to really balance a cymbal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. That's my only reference point for that. But I think there's
and people probably as well.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. Maybe you can do that with machines nowadays. Maybe like you can just have like I don't know if like there's some form of like spectrometer or something like that, a machine that can actually read the frequency printing of whatever you're doing and easily pinpoint to where the things are not right. And these big old factories have the money to like develop those things for sure. But if not, to equilibrate it out would require people. And the less people that you can hire for a job, the better. So
that's interesting to me, that that technology could be produced, maybe to like, so what's your thoughts on tension balance in a cymbal? Because there's, I like to oversimplify things and say the cleaner and more perfect a cymbal, the more one-dimensional and uninspiring. And so my way of saying that is like, take an A custom medium ride. It's very pristine. It's very clean, but it's just one sound. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's not a depth to it. So there's that. And then on the other side of the spectrum is the really funky ones that have weird tonal spots.
Yeah.
And the more funky something is, the more unique it is, but also the less versatile it is. And so you there's these two ends of the spectrum, and then we try to find our cymbals. Like, do you think about your cymbals? Do you want your cymbals to be perfect? Do you want there to be no hums or no tonal spots, or do you like a little bit of imperfection, a little bit of vibe, a little bit of what's your take on that?
In the particular aspect of going for like let's call it perfection of the cymbal, I go for functionality. As long as the functionality of the cymbal is not hindered, I don't care for a hum or I don't care for a bump. if there's a hum in the sweet spot of a cymbal, for sure, take it out, because otherwise it will be dysfunctional. It will be, I don't think as cymbals as how to put it, beautiful or ugly. I kind of do, but I don't regard beautiful or ugly as things that are either things to look for or to avoid. In that particular sense, I just go for functionality. It has to function as a cymbal. It cannot have a moment where whoever is playing it might actually be like taken away from the music just because out of nowhere, like a bad sound happened from an area that should have been a bit more rigid, not being rigid. Obviously, there's areas of a cymbal that you don't play that often on. Like, so anything around the bell is less played often. Obviously, I've seen drummers, like the other day that I went to a jam session, this drummer was playing almost entirely like a centimeter or two away from the bell. That was like his sweet spot for him. That is how he liked to play, not on my cymbals, on his own. So again, everybody's different, obviously, but most people play on a sweet spot. Most people like play right on the middle of the bow, a good couple of inches away from the edge. And then for the rest, I also think that some hums in some areas of different, I don't know, by the way, because the word tension, I would love to go into it. I'll say we can go into it afterwards after I say this. These areas of, let's call it, different rigidity or different thickness to them. Sometimes I do feel like they affect the overall sound. So some of them might actually give whatever I'm liking of a cymbal, so I don't want to take it away. Some of them might actually be hindering something that I would love to hear more of. So sometimes I do take them away just because they are there. The cymbal somehow doesn't sound as I want to. I'm like, okay, let's see if this kind of helps. So I try to like push here, push there, play it again, and like, oh, it did change. And the interesting thing is that it changed here while I did something over here. So it's so interconnected that those spots of imperfection, let's call it, which I don't like that word because I don't think there's such a thing as perfection, but those things of frowned upon characteristics. I don't look at them as shouldn't or should. I look at them as part of whatever I'm doing as a whole. So if as a whole it works, it works. If as a whole it doesn't, get rid of it. That's
the way to do it. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, but also that leads us into tension, which is a conversation that I would love to have.
Let's do it.
That for people that might not know, there's a Dave Collingwood is a fantastic human being in many ways, but he's also an incredible cymbalsmith and a person that is building a community nowadays, who I owe a lot to, not because of what he taught me, but because of how accompanied it made me feel to get to know him. You know, I was working at the factory, and not to diminish what they're doing at the factory, because again, I am not a very proud person. I felt pride for these guys when I left that spot, but they are not working there to be cymbalsmiths. The guys my other cymbalsmith people on the floor, they were kids that were doing this as they would have done any other job. They just happened to be hired for this one, and they took it. South America can be a very complex part of the world, and poverty there, it's a thing. People that are a bit more humble see themselves in situations that some of other people around the world don't see themselves. And people that were working in that factory were very humble people, incredible people, lovely people that had a lot of spirit and a lot of many positive things in them, but I don't think they saw their job with the same love that you or I see their job, because for them it was a job. For them it was a way of bring back home a bit of bread, while for me it was a life goal, right? So I didn't share the things around the factory. Around the factory, I felt very alone, and any question that I had was hardly answered. Any doubt, any I had to like find my own way in the factory, which was beautiful. And Fabian, the owner, allowed me so much freedom over there. But Dave pretty much was the moment where I started feeling like, there's other people like us around the world, and I love knowing them. And through him, I met you. And with Dave, I tried to have this conversation, and not to. I think Dave and I think very much alike, and I think you also shared that with Dave. But it can be very spiritual at points, and for this particular conversation of tension, I still cannot wrap my head around it, because I am not sure that I understand it to this point. I know that I have intuition towards it. I don't even know if we should use the word tension or not, because somehow tension most often is used to refer to how rigid a cymbal is, to how stiff a cymbal can be. But I wonder if there's more to tension. If the other day, Domene, I'm assuming most people that listen to this know who he is, posted an Instagram video of him having like a floppy cymbal, a cymbal that had obviously like what we would call low tension, right? That would not stay on a horizontal line on its edge when placed or when held from the bell. And then he flopped it on the ground, just like, bam, ground. And it sits on the ground perfectly flat. And he says, it's tense. There's tension. Tension is that it's part of a design. It's not part. He said something in Portuguese, kind of regarding to that, this tension, and kind of like trying to demystify the idea that tension is just this one-dimensional thing. And I wonder, what exactly is tension? Sometimes Dave has this phrase that I love, that I've built upon, which is shape is sound.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, it's a fantastic phrase that really like lets you go for it in a different way. But then there's a shape that you cannot see, right? The shape that you would need a microscope or something more intense than that to actually be able to see. And I wonder what the tension in there might be. And I know that I'm not saying anything other than asking questions, so maybe you can say something.
Yeah, I like the idea of just dismantling it. The idea, because there is, I think, to me, I see what you're saying with like tension is relative to a lot of other factors. Like it doesn't just exist on its own. It has to. So to me, tension is a way of referring to stiffness and looseness and the balance throughout a cymbal of that stiffness and or looseness. And I think the idea, and I like the idea of just, because Dave and I will talk about just like going down one trail and being like, I'm like really trying to understand a concept and then just throwing the concept out. Like I spent like a month on that concept and I made a bunch of cymbals using that concept, but I'm done with it. Let's move on to something else. And like kind of just like blow up your own technique to just start it afresh and have a new technique. And I've been, for me with tension, I think about this idea of a tent because it's hard to, and maybe structure is a better word than tension.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of, basically my idea with this tent thing. And I can't remember if it was something Dave said or something I said, or we were talking together and it kind of came out, but the idea of a tent, it's got these support structure, and then it's like cloth fabric stretched over top of this support. And, oftentimes you start out in cymbal making and you think, oh, you want it to bend, so you got to hammer the underside. That's how it bends. And so a lot of us, and I'm sure you're in this camp too, we just overworked the underside of our cymbals because we wanted it to bend. Then you start to realize, oh, there's top work is really important for that structure to sit and to have a nice stiffness that allows for stick definition, articulation, all of that. So then we start over processing the top of our cymbals and we get these big like dips into the bell, or we get little soft spots because we've just put so much work on the top and we've ignored the underside. And so my third stage in this whole process for me has been realizing that it's a balance between the work on the top and the bottom that creates this sense of equilibrium.
Mhm.
That's not about perfection. It's not about whatever. It's just about whatever is right for that particular piece. And it's the idea that you've got this tension is like stretched, or this stiffness is stretched over top of this structure that allows it to have the shape. And it's a very much a symbiotic relationship between top and bottom work. So maybe in my verbal processing here, the idea of like calling it structure rather than tension. Is that kind of your, what exactly is your problem with the word?
My problem with the word is that somehow it feels to me like that we use it so freely, and it might mean so many different things to whoever is using it at the moment, that and it's such an important word, because I feel like most of the things that we do, it ends up going to like tension, right? I guess my problem with it is that I would like to understand more about it. And I guess I would like to understand more about it, maybe through a physical stage. The other day, I've been saying that I work another job, but I work as a tour guide as well at the moment. And the other day I was doing a tour around Brussels, which is what I do. I guide people around and explain to them this building, that building, the city, etc. And I had this woman that asked me something about a sculpture that was a bit darkened. He said, why is it black? And I said, it's called patina. It's bronze. And I happen to know a bit about this because I'm a cymbal smith. And she's like, oh, I'm a chemist. I said, what? And for each stop after, like, let's say I was at a church and I explained the church, I let them go in. Then we walk like 10 minutes between the church and the next square. I just grabbed that woman and it's like, I need to ask you questions.
Tell me.
Yeah. And she wasn't very able to answer these questions because it turns out, as probably is obvious for most, but sometimes I can be a bit childish in the way I approach things. Chemistry is very deep and very wide, and it's very specialized, and her specialization was not dealing specifically with that. She was an organic chemist, I think, and that was more, she told me that is another line of work, what you're talking about. But she talked with me a little bit about it, and then she sent me a document later by email. I asked her a little bit about that, about tension, about what happens when I hammer. What is the real reaction of and I'm sure that there's information about that online, and I've tried to go for it, but somehow the language, like this, the specific requirements that you need to have pre-existing on your lexicon to be able to understand whatever you're reading makes it a bit unattainable for me. The same way that if a non-musician would have to read like a description of a very in-depth analysis of a whatever classical composer, it'll be like, I don't get it. And I'll be like, yeah, I get it. The same thing happened with me on that occasion. But I've just wondered since we know that what we're doing is hardening the material and compressing the material and deforming the material, and all of these three aspects create at the end the shape. And I could arrive at the same shape by hammering differently. We actually know that each cymbal that we hammer, it's impossible, because we're not machines, to actually hammer exactly the same. The space between hammer, the force between hammer marks is going to always be different. And I wonder if tension is really what happens is the relationship between these spots in the material that are more compressed with others that are less compressed, and how that relationship goes around through the material all the way through it. And stiffness is just one parameter or one phase of that relationship, but there's many more. The reason I think about this is because I can have two cymbals that have almost the exact same shape. I would measure them with like a caliper for curve. I would have lathed them the same. They are separated by 50 grams, and they sound different to a degree that would not signify just what you can see of it in front of you. And I wonder if that particularity of having the randomness of different spots of pretty much density of the material in one part or another is what really is tension. So there's many things like the same way that you call tension to whatever happens in a string, and whatever has happened, like the idea of like a string pulling apart from each other is tension. but so is tension. What happens when you have like a big plate of whatever steel placed in an edge and you sit on the other side of it, and that is tension as well, but it has nothing to do with pulling. You know what I mean? Like the word tension is a bizarre word that I don't understand entirely. And I know that we use it and that we have intuition for it, but
what I was gonna say was that exactly that, like a rubber band that you've just pulled just barely tight, and then you can pull it tighter. It hasn't changed its shape. It's just changed its amount of tension. You know, like it's still, you know, we've pulled it tight-ish, and it's a line, but then you can pull it tighter. It's still a line, but there's just more within that stretch.
Exactly. Yeah.
But what you just said is you added another dimension to it, because you said it's not just pull this way, it's also push and pull this way. So there's it's a multi-dimensional tension, is multi-dimensional in that sense.
But not only that, because wherever there's tension, there's also compression, right? Because at least in a cymbal, for the cymbal to actually become curved, there has to be compressed areas against distended areas of the actual material. It actually curves just because when you are compressing it, the material has nowhere else to go other than one way or the other. There is a reason, like you could just flip it upside down, and that's what I think. By the way, correct me if I'm wrong. Any of the experts I know, Nicky Moon is a avid reader of the physicality of bronze, and I know that there's many more. That is my interpretation. Like I feel like, for example, when you heard the interview with Nick Downing that was on Dave's website, and he describes this moment in which he went to Mexico, I think, and there was like these traditional vase makers, and how they were making these vases out of copper, and he was extremely impressed by the fact that these huge vases, the thickness of the bronze towards the edge, towards the, let's say, the entrance of the vase, compared towards the bottom, was actually very thick, almost as if you were displacing the material, as you stretch, the metal has nowhere else to go that in this shape, because it cannot create where there's nothing. So it kind of like finds its way to wherever space it's around it. So that's the reason it curves, right? But for that to happen, there has to be compression, because there's also a compressed part of it. So my head goes there, and
that's interesting. I haven't dug this deep into the word tension. And you're right. It's like I want to know if there's a better word to use. Because when you were talking about just the fact that you're a tour guide, I didn't know that. That's super interesting. What came to my mind was like just the word architecture, like the architecture of the cymbal, can be kind of a blanket term. The structure, you know, it's another way of saying structure. It could be a little bit less of an ambiguous word to kind of signify everything. And then you could dive down and you could talk about compression. You could talk about stretch. Cause like, that's another thing is like, which I was kind of saying that stretch and tension are the same thing, but I would like to maybe clear those away from each other and just say like the stretch, you know, you compress, like you hammer here, you hammer here, you've compressed the material where your hammer strike is, but all this material in between your two strikes has been pulled. You know what I mean? It's been, and depending on if it's bottom or top, it's been pulled in different ways. It's like there is a stretch between the work that we do. But then you could say, well, is it stretch, or is it that there's actually been like you were saying before with the copper vase, that there's been a gathering of more material because you've compressed and you've kind of pushed material. So are you stretching? Yeah. Are you pushing material together? Are you, I don't have an answer. It's kind of an interesting.
No, me neither. Experiment. And that is exactly, it's almost like, so the problem with this kind of exercise of thought is that it's so relatively useless, but not really, in the sense that we could not speak about it and still go do cymbals and still do a really good instrument, right? It's almost like there's more to it about intuition than there is to actual knowledge, but I like combining both. And and that is, I guess, part of the ambition that we were talking about earlier. That is another one of my ambitions. That is just knowing a tiny bit more as time goes by. In fact, I would love to. I haven't done any efforts to it at the moment because I guess I want to allow time before I do that. But I would love to meet Matt Nolan, because to whomever I've spoken so far about this have said that Matt Nolan is like a hermit genius, and I want to speak to a hermit genius, that understands deeply. I think he's an engineer, right?
Yeah.
So he's an engineer, and so like he actually understands the actual physical aspect of what's happening.
He knows what's going on. That's what I've heard too.
Yeah.
I've never had a conversation with him, but he apparently has the answers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I with all this kind of stuff, I like it. I like these conversations because it just gets me feeling inspired, which then usually translates into just sitting down with Bronze and then going to town hammering it. It's like the idea is not to comprehend fully. The idea is like, well, what does this spur me to try? How does this cause my perspective to shift? Like we were talking about earlier, what kind of new perspective can I bring? And, I think that one of the best things I ever did for being a cymbalsmith was my time in university, just listening to music. I listened to ungodly amounts of music. I practiced for hours a day, and I was just an avid ingester of music, all different kinds of music, just trying to like learn about all the different players. And it's like that kind of just devouring, and it's not devouring of information for information's sake, just so that I could say, well, I know who played drums on that 1967 record with blah, blah, blah. And I know what happened. And it's not so that you can just regurgitate stats. You know what I mean? It's like you're ingesting something that is in a sense feeding that intuition that we talked about, or that you said a second ago, of, because that's what you need, is that intuition when you're sitting down with a piece of bronze. Because if you hyper analyze everywhere you strike and you think too much about it, you start to get into a place of maybe being afraid, or you're overthinking. You're not like getting into a flow state. You want to be able to trust yourself and have confidence in yourself to let that intuition take you where somewhere, not even like to a particular destination. You just want it to take you somewhere. And at the end, you want to be able to hold a cymbal and say, I think this will inspire someone to make music. You know what I mean? But I did enjoy that wild rabbit trail of like, let's dismantle this word that cymbal makers use all the time to talk about what they're doing. Do we really understand what we're saying when we say tension?
And absolutely, because that was one of the things that was happening in Colombia, and this whole thing is born in my head out of being relatively new at the moment, right? Hammering a cymbal, and I've had cymbals in my hands for a long time. So I've done the thing of bending them. I've done I know how they feel. I know that some of them wobble, some of them are stiff, right? And in Colombia, the solution to every problem, whenever let's say I had a cymbal that I just finished, right? And it's like, I think it's done, right? And I put it next to me, and then one of the other cymbalsmiths comes to me, plays them, and is like, no, it's missing tension, right? And I'm like, what's like?
What do you mean?
What do you mean exactly? And right at that point, it was like where it starts, when I start to get like a bit of a trifle with the word tension too.
Yeah. I like the word balance too, because balance. Have you ever seen those guys that stack rocks and they do it?
Yeah. You
know what I mean? Like they go to streams and they just stack these rocks in these towers, and you're looking at it and you're going, how is that thing that looks lopsided? How is it balanced? And that's just the word. It's like the weight is distributed in a way that is creating an equilibrium, a balance.
Exactly.
And so oftentimes when I think about, like, if a customer sends me a cymbal and they say, hey, it's got a hum, and they'll usually say, get rid of the hum, or can you get rid of the hum? And what I usually say is, I know what you mean, but no, I can't get rid of it. What I can do is I can balance it. I can like, because right now that loose spot or that dip or that soft area is feeding this sound we are hearing. We're perceiving it cutting above the rest of the cymbal. So we're hearing wow, 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 wow when we hit on the cymbal. So what's needed is equilibrium. The cymbal needs to be brought into some sort of equilibrium so that that tone, I can change the tone, I can raise it, I can lower it, I could do things but really it's about moving it. It's like moving it down into the mix of the cymbal itself. It's because the cymbals, I had a general education course my last year of university. I just waited to do my general education course on science till my last semester. And it was the first semester they were offering a course called the physics of sound. They had never offered this class. And I was like, oh, that could be cool. And I did my entire project in that class on cymbals. Before I was a maker, I just loved cymbals. All right. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do my project. And so I did all this research on like the physics of what's happening. And I found like plate tectonics where they would like put sand on plates and they would vibrate the plates.
Oh, yeah.
And the sand kind of gathers into the what's called the nodes, the areas that aren't moving. It gathers into those. Yeah. And it creates these wild patterns that almost create like a web in the metal. Basically the whole, the point of telling that is like, I came to an understanding that cymbal metal produces the most complex waveform of just about any instrument. It's not, if you look at all, like the frequency spectrum is wild, it's deep, it's got highs and lows and mids, and it's all over the place. So we're dealing with incredibly complex sounds, and there's many of them in the sound of one cymbal. So what's needed to create a cymbal that's inspiring in a lot of sense is just balance. It's like the rocks being stacked. It's like they just need some sort of equilibrium, and they can look different ways. Like they're not just going to be stacked perfectly straight. They can be like weirdly shaped and they look like they're leaning and they look like this, but they're stacked together. And the gravity, maybe gravity is another word, like the gravity of the rocks being pulled towards the Earth's core, when balanced and when in an equilibrium stacked, they can have these crazy unique shapes but still be balanced together.
Yeah.
I like to think of cymbal making that way. It's like it's less about perfection or imperfection, but what is a good equilibrium for this cymbal to have. Obviously, we don't want particular notes to shoot out way farther than anything else. We want it to be a blend. And we want to create like high fidelity where the stick definition sits on top. There's interesting mids. There's a nice wash underneath, and nothing is like muddying. We don't want like a muddy cymbal. We don't like if we just hit it in the playing surface and it goes like that, and you can't hear your stick patterns. It's just like a white noise machine. Like that's not great unless it's a crash cymbal. And if you're just going like this, fine. But I said a lot in that. Basically the point being is maybe tension, maybe that word needs to die a quiet death, and we can start talking about equilibrium. We can talk about balance. We can talk about
definitely, or maybe just like I have a feeling, again, all very feeling related, nothing like precise concrete knowledge, but I have a feeling that the word tension might be divided in different tensions, and that is where I'm looking at the moment, because I do like thinking of tension also in terms of rigidity, because it does help definitely in the making of a cymbal. It greatly makes your chances of making a good one while you're learning. But again, I would like to maybe start myself. I think years from now, when I arrive, when it decants into something a bit more congruent, I think I will probably be understanding tension in a multitude of different ways of seeing tension, like the tension of this, the tension of that, the tension of here, and that will inform me better. At the moment, I know that we perceive them. I know that you, me, and pretty much everybody else that does this, or like the people that I see online, the guys that have been here, the podcast, we perceive it, we know it, we feel it with the hands. How much are we be able to like put from the hand to the brain to the mouth? That is different, and that is what I also would like to. I really like speaking about these things. When I first met Dave, well, not when I first met him, but it was like the fourth time I called him, or fifth time I called him, and after like 10 or 15 minutes of me speaking to him, he's like, man, I think you need a therapist. And I was like, maybe that's right, maybe Dave is my therapist. I like that very much, because I was almost calling him not really to ask him questions, but just to speak to somebody about cymbals. I love doing it, and I felt like I had no one to do it with, not at the level that we do it when we make them as well. So yeah, that was
wow. Yeah,
that was really cool.
The therapist thing is real. I think and you could probably say like the bronze. This is gonna sound so silly, but the bronze is our therapist in a sense, because I find like, I mean, I'm just sitting down at the metal and doing away with distractions, not thinking about emails, not thinking about social media, not thinking about sales are down or sale, whatever. You just like clear all of it out, and you just sit there. And like, in the podcast, previous episodes of this podcast, we end up talking about social media. We end up talking about the state of society today and how distracted we are, how our attention spans are super short. There's just an ever increasing need for this voracious consumerism. We got to come out with the next best thing. We got to increase, give it more specs, make the new model better than the old model. So people got to buy the new model. And we're living in it's like our brain chemistry is changing because it's so fast paced. We don't know what it's like to slow down. And cymbal making, the shaping of bronze is like a slow process.
Yeah.
And I think my favorite part about it, and why I'd venture to call it my therapist in a lot of ways, is like it's a place I can pour myself into, and it requires that I put aside my modern mind, my racing thoughts, my a lot of my fears and anxieties get put aside, and I'm just there. I'm just with this material, kind of just, I'm hammering it, I'm lathing it, I'm burnishing it, I'm doing all this stuff to it, and I'm just seeing what happens. And it's like the way you could relate cymbal making to life and to music is pretty endless. Like you said, you got into music kind of as a way to buck against the consumerist.
I don't think so. I think it was just a reflection of maybe part of my how you call it, like unconscious personality was driving me towards arts because of that part of who I am. But I really got into music just because I was a kid that somebody told you're good at it, regardless of me being good or not at it. Like, I think we underestimate very much the power that some adult saying, "Hey, you're good at it," has, because
do it. Yeah. So what took you that next step? Because obviously you had that initial encounter. Did you have a secondary encounter that felt more like a pull in your spirit towards like the art form?
I don't know. As I told you before, like with anything that I do, my relationship with it has always been like very love-hate. I think it's part of my personality. It takes me a long time to like what I do, or to understand why I like what I'm doing, or how do I love it. I know that instinctually, I am much faster than I am brain-wise, or I don't know, or like conceptually wise in a way. But I think that I've always loved music. That what I can tell you now, as a 33-year-old person, is that I know that I've always loved music from the moment that I started doing it. Even before, there's a lot of how you call it, how you call the like clues, right?
Mm.
To it, as in my growth videos and things that my mom has, like I was singing from when I was like I was on stages when I was like 3 years old singing, and I had no shame whatsoever. It felt to me like something natural, I guess. um and but I then comes the place where you're thinking of good and bad as parameters that dictate how valuable it is that you are and how valuable it is what you're doing.
Mm.
And under those, I measured most of what I was doing earlier through those, and that did a lot of damage. And
Mm.
so throughout my teenage years, especially when I went to New York afterwards, I wouldn't be able to say that if I love music or not. In fact, I do have a moment, a
Oh,
good story. I have a good story right now that I remembered. Um, I'm in New York, right? I'm studying music in New York. I when I was before 19, I was pretty much into like other kinds of music. At 19, I discovered jazz. I thought that is the way, that is what you have to do. I did a little bit by myself in Venezuela while I was there. I was studying at the moment at a school that did not have instrument education. It was mainly a theoretical composer's school, a fantastic place with a woman ahead of that school that I think should be a national hero for Venezuela. I know,
mm.
sadly, it will not be the case during her lifetime because my country is at the moment not a country, but she's a hero. She's a real life hero, and she was teaching music in Venezuela where there was very little music education at the level that she was doing it. And but no instrument, since it was only her. It was literally her teaching university level classes
Wow.
by herself on her living room to like a good 30 people all the time. She was giving every single class. In any case, I go to the US,
Wow.
and in the US, I encounter or I have to deal with like the instrument side of it, like the competitive, really competitive side of the instrument, of like you're good or you're bad, you're killing it or you're not. Good cuts this way, shit cuts the other way. And I think I was really unhappy in the US, and I had these lessons with people, with a person that people would probably die to have a lesson with, Reggie Workman. Yeah, and I
Mm.
was on his ensemble, and after each semester, the ensembles record. That is what you do in the school. So like we go to the space to record that ensemble's yearly practice and repertoire, or semester actually, repertoire. And I'm having a bad time because I was not supposed to be the drummer for that particular ensemble. Reggie was only not taking him because he wasn't. The school was giving Reggie like the star kids of the school, right? Like the ones that ended up being, by the way, crazy musicians nowadays. That ensemble was with Jeremy Dutton was supposed to be the drummer for that
Mm.
ensemble. Now he's playing with Vijay Iyer. In fact, he
Wow.
left the ensemble because he went on tour with Vijay Iyer. The school had nobody to replace him. And I just happened to be walking down the hallway through administration that day. And Kyle, the guy that ran administration, he's like, hey, do you mind being part of his ensemble? I was like, all right, for sure. Is Regis? Oh, yeah, for sure. And I'm forgetting the name
Wow.
of the piano player. The piano player now plays with Pat Metheny. I forgot his name.
Oh man.
Yeah, that was the ensemble that I was in. And those kind of
Wow.
kids, like, and these kind of kids were expecting something, and they were all friends with Jeremy, the guy that was supposed to be the drummer. So the ambient inside that room was not good.
Mm.
I wasn't up to the challenge, and these guys were very annoyed at my presence, and that was a whole 6 months of it. On the recording, I was having a bad day. I was giving it my best, but also I guess I was grouchy and grumpy and all of these things inside of me that I couldn't deal with because of how I perceived myself as well. And mid-recording, we stop, and Reggie comes to me. I was sitting down, like everybody went out of the theater where we recorded, like all of the other kids, and I just sat down on the benches, like far back by myself. And Reggie comes to me and says, "Hey man, I need to ask you one question." I was like, "Yeah, for sure." I was a bit like probably reticent to his presence next to me because I was embarrassed. I knew he was, and he says, "Do you love music?" And at that moment, it's such an easy question, right? For a musician that has spent the last 10 years of his life playing music, that did everything he could to go to New York, that the answer should be yes, almost instinctively. And I couldn't say yes in a heartbeat. And I realized it right there when I stumbled on the yes, when I was like, yeah, for sure, I do love music, that something was wrong. And that is the moment, I think, where I had to like rethink things in terms of music, because I knew for sure that there has to be a love. It was not only how you call it. It was not only inertia, you know. If it was only inertia, I wouldn't have had enough power to get where I went to. I would have desisted years earlier. So I had to find where the love was. But I find it so incredible how just a single question, as simple as you love music, do you love music? Hey man, do you love music? And by the way he looked at me, you wouldn't have had a clue. Like that also, like just me almost like looking away from him for a second, like, and say, yeah, I do love music. And then looking back at him, and he just had like this look on his face of like, okay, goes away, says nothing, just goes away.
Woo! Heavy.
Yeah, man.
That's heavy.
And I did have many ensembles with him later, where I started to experiment with something that I hadn't done before, which was free jazz and free improvised music, and more on the contemporary side. And that opened my mind and opened my heart and made me feel like a human again. And he's a crazy important human being for me as well. Like,
wow.
Yeah.
Man, that hits me in a lot of different ways, because I had a similar desire to be like a really top level, like as good as I could be, move to New York, do that whole thing. And when it came down to it, it was like there was something like I wasn't like the level at which I'm giving my energies to cymbal making, to my businesses. I didn't have that for music. And it was like, you kind of look around and you see the other people in music because I went to music school, but in a tiny little mountain town. It wasn't a prestigious school at all, but there was some really serious musicians there. And you look around at those guys and they're practicing like 8 hours. They're practicing and playing music like 8 hours a day. They're incredibly serious about it. And there was just something that like didn't grab me about giving it my all, I guess, like really giving it everything I had. I wouldn't, like, if someone was to ask me that question, like, do you love music? I would have said yes, but maybe there would be a part of me that's like, I don't actually love it the way I would need to love it were it to become the thing that I gave my life to. And it's weird to be like in a place where what I love is related, like tangentially related to music. Obviously we're making instruments, but there's a whole nother dynamic aspect of it that's there. Do you think that we give a go at the music thing, and it's just kind of like a part on the journey that leads us maybe where we're supposed to be? Like, is it providence, or is it like do you think you were destined to be a cymbal maker and you were just kind of going about it? Your journey just took you in some different directions, or do you think it's just like random?
I don't think it's random. I do think there's a lot of, and it's not predetermination either, but there's almost like inclinations. I think we have inclinations. It's not predetermination, it's nothing like that. It's not random either. We just naturally are birthed or created, or maybe like the first years of our life do like some arrangement of our personality that allows us to be more inclined to one thing or the other, you know. I think that my inclinations are leading me on the place that is more natural to me. I do feel like that what I'm doing right now, it's extremely natural. Like that idea that you were speaking about of feeling almost therapeutic sense of relief when you're making an instrument, it's the same. If it wasn't for the fighting part of myself that it's always like not good enough just yet, which has very little to do with what I have in front of me and much more to do with what I have inside of here. If it wasn't for that, it will be a 100% therapeutic moment. It has its therapeutic moments. There's days that I come here and it's like the world is lighter. The other day I was literally I was thinking on the way back to the subway from my workshop, like I'm wondering if like the moon is closer to the earth. I'm wondering if I feel physically lighter to a degree that I hadn't felt before, that I was wondering if there was some astronomical reason for it. but I'm pretty sure it had to do with the workshop, as there are days that I go out of here very frustrated with life in general.
Yeah.
But this inclination of making things, it's absolutely right one for me. Music itself, I think I'm a musician. I think I can say very clearly I am a musician without a doubt in my heart. If I'm a professional musician or not, that is something that can be up for debate. I have been in my past. I am not one now. When I entered, Muisca is the name, by the way. I talk about the company in Colombia to whoever might be listening all the way up to now. Muisca is their name. Go check them out. They are fantastic, really good people. And for doing mainly rock cymbals and like more heavy Latin-ish cymbals, what they're doing is really great. Simple as that. And it's the work of a very small team. So it's really commendable what they're doing. In any case, when I entered that factory, I knew it. Like I was pretty much signing that contract, knowing that it's like a cornerstone moment, right?
Yeah.
I cannot spend 2 years in a factory where I worked literally 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, and expect to also be a musician. It's impossible. Like not only your wrist, like I've never experienced a sore wrist before. I thought my wrists were good because of the drumming thing, but not a hammer, not a 1.2 kilo hammer, you know, like that's a different thing. So I remember like getting home after the factory, trying to like practice and feeling like there's no motility in my hand anymore because of the amount of soreness. A soreness that now is gone because I guess the body adapts to it. But it was a moment of division. And I do want to play music. I do want to do music. I feel like music has been for me the scope through which I've been able to understand life all the way up to now, and arts in general. And music is very special in the arts because it's so intangible, it's so fleeting, it's so somehow also crazy intuitive. I somehow sometimes speak with people about music that are not musicians, and there's this sad notion that, well, I mean, I kind of like music, but I'm not really good at it. Or like there are the musicians and the non-musicians, and I have this idea as cuckoo or hippie-ish as it might be, but I think we're all musicians, not as a spiritual thing, not from like a perspective of universal whatever. I think we're all musicians genetically. I think genetically and biologically, human beings are musicians, like more than any other form of expression. I think we deal with musicality in our daily lives and we don't know it, we don't perceive it. And music is just the most developed and beautiful and aesthetic presentation of that aspect of being a human. But I think we're musicians as humans. So I think it's a beautiful thing that I value like crazy. But sadly, at this moment, not sadly, I'm very happy with what I'm doing. It's been put in the second place for cymbals smithing, which is definitely top point at the moment.
Yeah. It's tough because I think I guess thinking back on my own like journey to become a cymbalsmith and become a maker of instruments, I think it was really born in a lot of ways out of my failure to make it as a musician, and like in it, not so much in a skill sense, because I mean, I feel like I'm good as a drum. I'm good, not great, not bad, not whatever. And I also don't really think I hate the whole terminology of prodigy. We like to throw that around as a way to, in some sense, like discourage ourselves. It's like, no, that the reason that person's so amazing is they just work their butt off. Like they just put in the hours.
Yeah.
And you're calling it prodigy like it's some mystical thing that was given to them.
No.
And it's for me, like the cymbal making thing, I felt major love and passion about music. And that love and passion was kind of snuffed out by, and I don't know if you have a similar feeling about this, but that passion was sort of snuffed out by the real world of working musicians and like the way things are and the politics of, you get into a band and they've got history with another musician and they've, fallouts and friendships, but then they mend their friendships and then you get kicked to the curb because they've worked it out. And then like the guys that get all the gigs are the guys that just live there for 20 years and, they just put in the time and they know the people and it's cutthroat, it's competitive. It's like, you just watch everybody kind of cut each other down. And then you're just there, you're like trying to make it as a side man. Like I'm not a composer. So I basically was there just like, please hire me to do your music, and it was like, it was never something I had my own heart in. It was always like, I was serving the vision of some other artist or coming in and playing drums in a church or coming in, filling in at a jam session or whatever it was. And it wasn't until maybe part of it has to do with like the ownership of being like, I'm going to do this. Not like I'm going to do this for me, but like, I'm going to follow what my heart says to follow, which is cymbal making or whatever it is. And it was like the first time I ever felt like I really was after, and mainly this is probably more related to my drum business and my other businesses as well. But like, that was the first time I ever did something that was me just seeing what I was capable of doing. Like, am I capable of following this crazy idea and making something that might work, that might provide for me so that I don't have to go play crappy cover gigs or like jam sessions where you're playing Take the A Train, like it's like it felt more deep and personal. And it was like something I could really run after and put my whole heart into.
Relate absolutely, by the way, to what you're saying. Like there's what the story that you've just told. If you just changed the name Timothy for Mariano, I would not see any part of it that doesn't resonate with me. And exactly the same. I feel like the world itself, in a way, did make it less clear, make it more like I don't know how to put it, like sandy water on the shore where it's like very sandy, not pristine and clear, farther away from it. That is how it felt to me. And that period in New York that I spoke to you about, I feel like it was that it was not only that, but also myself. There's many things, like there's the way that you're having been to New York, by the way, it's a burden, not a joy. It's terrible because wherever I go to, people know that I went to New York and they're like, oh, you went to New York, so you must be this, you must be that, you must know this and must know that. What is and it's like, man, like my experience over there is gonna disappoint you. It's not what you think. And
I've heard from a lot of my buddies that were like, it just chewed me up. It chewed me up. It spit me out. It is not the place for me.
I have a perspective that I give people, because especially when I was living in Bogota, I was actually opening jam sessions in Bogota quite often, while I was also working for the cymbal factory. That was my only little connection to music during that time. I had a friend that was opening jam sessions, and he called me up every once in a while. And the kids would come to me and like, I would love to go to. How is it? And I told them, like, forget about going to New York. It's not about skill. People have this idea that it's about skill. It's about capability. So it's about how fluent you are in your instrument as a musician. It has absolutely nothing to do with that, because I saw guys that were, let's say, equivalent to me, that were able to take much more advantage than I did when I was there. And I saw guys that were on a different level that fell into the cracks, and they are now programming for life, right? It's about, I tell them, do whatever you can to be proficient enough. That is important for sure. But then do a lot of emotional work on yourself.
Yeah.
That's it. If you are not a strong human being when you enter that city, you're done. It is about being able to make friends without measuring yourself before you speak to somebody. It is about being able to be understanding of the steps that it might take for you to learn something in comparison to somebody else. It is about not being in constant shame of who you are just because of who you have next to you. What will matter? That's it. If you're not a strong human being when it comes to emotionality, don't go. Otherwise, go.
I would say that what you just said does not only apply to moving to New York. I feel like that's like life wisdom.
Yeah.
Because that honestly feels like some of the most like exciting life wisdom I've heard for anyone that's like, because we have businesses, right? We're making a product to sell, all of that, but we are in a lot of ways like musicians, like artists. We are artisans. And the difference is like we think that when we're musicians, like when you're a musician, you're a business, and the business is you. The business is what you play, how you play, all of that. You're selling yourself, your service of playing drums or piano or whatever it is. And if you can't, like, because we get so caught in that like comparison thing where we look and we go, well, I'm not such and such. Like, I'm not as good as such and such. I'm not this, I'm not that. I wish I could be more like X drummer, X musician. Like for me, it's like, I wish I could be more like X cymbal smith, or I wish I could capture whatever. Those thoughts can come into your mind, but it's like what you said is like on one level that like be proficient enough, but then do a lot of emotional work. I think that applies almost any area in life, just to be like a content human. Cause I'm with you. I don't think it's about happiness, because like you said, we have plenty of days like that. I have plenty of days out in my shop where I just want to chuck the cymbal across the room and just like destroy it, because I'm so mad it's not doing what I want. I'm like, that's not happiness, but like there's something deeper than happiness, which I would say is maybe what we're after. It's like the meaning of the meaning. Like we have meaning in approaching this art form.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
saying,
exactly.
And going back to what you said at the beginning of like, I just want to discover what I don't know. Like that's meaning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's purpose. And that'll get you through those days where you're like mad and you hate what you do and you just want to like give it up, or days where you're like discouraged. You're like, man, there's so many other people out there that do what I want to do, or, but because in a way, we're all just presenting ourselves via social media. We're all just presenting ourselves in the light that we want to be seen in. And that's not always accurate. It's like not always true to what's going on. It doesn't include all of the human elements that we have to fight through and struggle with as artists, as musicians, as makers of instruments, as business owners. Like, and it does really feel like the people that, because I've had the same experiences of people that, like buddies of mine, that were just the top of the percussion studio in school. And 1 year after they graduate, they're working a desk job. And they're like, oh, I haven't touched my instrument in 6 months. And so you got the people that just have all the skill, you know, they have all the skill, they're prodigies. But like, that's not going to sustain. Just being a prodigy or just being good or being whatever is not going to sustain you. And just in the same manner, a lack of skill or a lack of experience or a lack of confidence doesn't mean you're not going to succeed. You know what I mean? That's like, I feel like one of the, like, I feel like I'm not the most talented. I'm not even close to the most talented. I feel like I'm one of the most average drummers and one of the most average cymbal, you know, like enthusiasts, but like, I just love it. And my love carries me through, and I just, you know what I mean? That's what takes me where I want to be.
Yeah.
So it's like, it doesn't matter. Like skill comes when you really devote yourself to something, and you're only going to devote yourself to something that you love.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And there's also like, I don't remember exactly what part of what you just said resonated or made me remember this phrase. When it comes to making things, you're saying like, yeah, like, I might not be the best at this or the best at that, or I don't perceive myself, because being the best or whatever, that could be another 2-hour conversation, but
right.
I don't perceive myself as this, which other people might perceive me as well. But it is the love for it. And I think it's not only the love, but these inclinations that I spoke about initially sometimes are very strong. And I go back to Dave because I've just spoke. I think it's the Cymbals myth that I've spoken to the most. And he says this other thing that it's absolutely true. It's like, I don't make this because I love it. I don't make this because I want to have a livelihood. I don't make this. All of those things are just around it gravitationally. And it makes sense that they are around it. And it's the best structure to my life at this moment. But I am doing this because I cannot not do it. That phrase, I cannot not do it.
Yeah.
That is also a big part of, I feel like, how I perceive loving it. I love it not only because I am proud and happy when I do it, and because it makes me feel joy, and because it makes me feel accomplished as well, which is something that I've been looking. Going back to the musician thing, I never felt like an accomplished musician. I would not say bad or good or whatever. I never felt like an accomplished musician. I always felt like I was always trailing behind that bunny, trying to catch it, and that bunny was getting farther away the longer that I was alive. That is how it felt to me. And here I feel accomplished. I do feel really accomplished in what I'm doing.
Do you feel proud? Do you feel proud?
Yes, definitely, of myself and of where I am at the moment. Yes, but that feeling of pride can easily go away in one day of not feeling like I was effective or etc.
Yeah.
But the idea of being unable to not do it, for me, it's a beautiful idea, because somehow it speaks about to our natural inclinations, and to somehow being one of the few lucky ones that are able to like this, how I see it almost like pinball balls, right? In this infinite table. And I was just very lucky to, like, the pinball ball went into the hole, into like the cone that just happened to be right for me, and I'm going around it.
Yeah.
While many other pinball balls that are around there just float into infinity and bounce against so many corners and never. So, like, feeling that I'm doing this because I'm unable to not do it makes me feel like I am in agreement with my natural inclinations, and that is a really good part of, like, not happiness, not anything. As you said, it's not happiness, it's more than that. It's like some weird form of meaning, right? So yeah,
it's like finding a groove, like to use the term of a pinball, like you hit like a little groove, and it's like that groove is taking you, and you're in it. It's like, sure, things could knock you out of it, like life circumstances happen, and can knock us out. Like I could have something happen and I could lose function in my hand tomorrow and never make another cymbal. You know, that's the whole other aspect of this is like people have their experiences and their traumas and their joys and successes and failures and all that stuff. But it's good. It's like, just for now, I feel like I found that track, that groove that I'm in. And it's like, I can't not do it because I'm in the groove. So it's like, it's what's going to happen until something changes or the direction changes or whatever it is. And it's like, you can take little moments to like be not satisfied, but take little moments to be at peace and kind of thankful. I think thankfulness maybe is a way of putting it. It's like, wow, like there's a lot of people around me that like, there's a lot of drummers way better than me that haven't found their thing yet. You know what I mean? Or people, not just drummers, but just people that are maybe more skilled in a number of different ways that just haven't found their thing and they're still struggling for it. It's like, I could be really thankful. You know, I'm in my early 30s too. It's like, I could be really thankful that I found something, you know?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's a real gift.
Absolutely. Something that absolutely. And what you're doing, by the way, of doing multiple things, I think that speaks a lot also to when I was building the website that is live now. The moment that I had the most amount of time that I've spent was on the part where I had to speak about myself. I don't know what to say. I mean, I kind of know what to say, but I don't know if it makes sense to put it here. It is a business site, so it has to be business oriented. It has to give you a fast idea of who I am so that you're right. And it's like, Jesus, because I wanted to speak so much about the idea of making, of creating, of like, there's something about what you're doing. For example, it's not only cymbals, right? You're also doing drum sets and you're also doing percussive instruments. And I know that at the moment by what I've listened to you, not only today, but in previous conversations that I've heard you speaking with Dave or other people or the other podcasts, I know that right now you're seeing the cymbals as like the most meaningful of them all. But I'm absolutely sure that in the others, even though that the others might be a bit more predeterministic in the sense that, well, you know that the wood is going to be this way, and you know that if you put it that way, it's going to end up in this shape, and that you sand it right. It's like, it's a bit more easier to the eye towards the hand than a cymbal is, right? But there's also something very beautiful about woodworking. I spent, like, when I go to it, I just watch people doing things, and there's something absolutely fantastic about making things. And that, I think, is the gravitational thing that we're speaking about. I think we just happen to stumble into cymbals, and we're drummers and we love sound as well. And so cymbals were absolutely perfect. But I guarantee you, if your life had gone a different direction, you would be making something.
Yeah. Right.
It might not have been cymbals, but you would be making something. It makes something with the hands, like doing like this or like that or like whatever it is, and then grabbing it and saying like, whoa, I made this. And not only I made this, but I made this, and hey, it's not yours.
Yeah. Well, it's the best feeling in the world. I see it in other places too. It's like, I see leather bags and I'm like, oh man, someone handmade that leather bag. Or I was traveling a few weeks back and I found this, we walked by this really nice, like handmade kitchen knife shop. And they had this whole little area where they had all these like grinding stones and sharpening wheels, and it was all done in house. The knives were like thousands of dollars for like a single like cutting knife. And they had this little side portion that had this thing called a tactile pen or tactile turn pen or something. And it was just like this handmade pen. And they have one made in bronze and one that's copper. And it was just like, I don't know, it's just this company that makes pens, and they're like really expensive. But I was like, I didn't buy one, but I'm like, I told my wife, I was like, Christmas list, if we can afford it, like a nice, just because it's like knowing it wasn't just cranked out in some factory and it didn't cost 5 cents to make. Like it's almost something about like, handmade cymbals are expensive instruments, like relative to like, I could buy a custom or a AAX ride and it'd be like I don't know how much they cost now, but like they're probably getting pretty expensive, even those now. But like the things that I have to sacrifice for to purchase that are really nice, like I value them more. It puts me in touch. And maybe this is like a shameless plug for, buy our cymbals, because we're making cymbals, but it puts me, it almost like connects me in a human way to this thing, because it causes me, again, it's another thing that causes me to slow down, causes me to like appreciate something, that had a lot of time, energy, and care put into it. And so much of like what I see online and like just so much of the apps that we use, it's so like, it feels cheap and throwaway, and like it doesn't cause me to get in touch with anything human. It's like, if anything, it's making me less human because I'm more distracted. I'm more all these things. So the process of like, my ultimate goal, if I can get to this place, my goal would be to own a cymbal from all of the independent makers and have like a collection, to have some like a drum room in some house someday that I've got I've got one of your cymbals. I've got a Collingwood. I've got a Craig Lauritsen. Like I love Craig's work. If I had a Craig Lauritsen, if I had a Matt Nolan.
I have a story about Craig Lauritsen here.
Yeah, tell me.
Man, which also made me feel a bit good. I'll tell you why. Because there's this guy, he's a bass player from Brussels, great bass player. And he's also, weirdly enough, a cymbal lover. I've never met another musician that is not a drummer that is like he's a cymbalholic. And he has, and in between many cymbals that he has a Craig Lauritsen. And he has this little room in his house where he makes a lot of sessions all the time. And he has drummers from all of Brussels go around. And when he met me and I went to his house to play a little bit, he's like, oh yeah, and I have this Craig Lauritsen, and really, I don't kind of like it too much. Do you think you could modify it a bit? And I immediately told him like, no, I'm not going to do that. It's not going to happen. I don't touch that cymbal. But more than that, I was surprised that he didn't like it. He didn't like it, not because he didn't like it, but because every drummer that went through that room, according to him, said they didn't like the cymbal. And I was so very curious, and I started playing it, and I was like, it's an incredible cymbal. It's so good. Of course, it is not hyper dry. Of course, it has more wash than he maybe is used to, but it's such a beautiful cymbal. I was like, wow, right? And so I was very surprised, and that was one of the moments, like a couple of months ago, when I was like really like self-inflicting damage by thinking maybe my ears are wrong, maybe the way I listen to cymbals is wrong, maybe like these guys are right, maybe that's how cymbals should sound, and I'm just not, maybe like, I don't know what it might be. And finally, another drummer that I respect to make the story short, this Basil, this bass player, buys a cymbal from me, right? A cymbal that he likes. He's the only second person that has ever bought from me at the moment. Yeah. And I don't remember exactly where the story was going. Why did he buy the cymbal? In any case, another drummer comes to him, another drummer that is a very good drummer that is also cymbalholic, another drummer that came to my shop that liked my work, that was very happy with what I was doing. And just out of coincidence, he mentioned, and I went to the other day to Basil's house and I played the Craig Lauritsen. It's such a good cymbal. I told him it's a beautiful one. And so he also saw what I was seeing. And I remember exactly why. So as part of a payment that Basil wanted to, I was dealing with him to sell him my cymbal. And I was like, by the way, if you want to get rid of a Lauritsen, maybe could trade, or I could offer you a deal or something like that. And he's doubting about it. Maybe I want it, maybe I don't. And out of nowhere, he sends me a text like, no, I want to keep the Lauritsen. And that was just before this guy comes to me and says, I also told him that I liked it, And so like, like this idea how our ears and our perception is also very psychological, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
If other people come in and say, oh, that's good, you'll put that in front of what your own ears are hearing. Like you might not like a cymbal and someone else says, oh, this is the most amazing cymbal I've ever heard. And then you're like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that is the most amazing. Or it's the reverse. Like you just said, it's no one says they like it, but you're like, I actually kind of love that. weird
Yeah.
thing, right? That it's actually beautiful. It's actually,
Yeah.
you know,
And
it's
the
like,
weird part is that it's not even weird. I would get it if it was a weird symbol, a deformed one with like weird shades and the hums. It wasn't. It was just a bit not washy. You know what it was? It had very high volume. Like it very easily excited itself. It was not washy. It was just almost like, oof, I don't know what word to use. It was in your face, but in a way that I was very happy for something to be in my face. You know,
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
was
Yeah.
that was what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I feel like drummers nowadays don't want to put in the work to learn their cymbals. They want their cymbals to just adapt to them.
Yeah.
And when I do little clinics and workshops and I talk about like technique, or I talk about like a way to approach the instrument, I like to talk about how every instrument has a way that it wants to be played. And I know we care a lot about our own voice. We care a lot about what we have to say, how we play. And I think all of that is super valid. And obviously, like, we play how we play. But there's also this other side to the relationship with music, which is the instrument that you're playing on. And you being able to adapt, being able to learn an instrument, learn how it wants to be played, play it in a way that makes it sound beautiful. Like, there's beauty in that. There's also beauty in taking an instrument that resonates at lower volumes and playing it loud so that it chokes. There's a character even there, but it's all about intention. It's about an intentionality. And I think a lot of guys nowadays just want the pre-processed cymbal. They want the cymbal that comes sounding like the record.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a lot of work, you know, and I think it's beautiful to put in that work to learn your instrument, learn how to play it like it wants to be played, get a new cymbal. Like perfect example. I own a Collingwood cymbal. It's the only cymbal I own that's not, that's from another independent maker. I don't own, I basically sold all my other cymbals. I have a couple that I keep for, that are sentimental, but the only other cymbal I own is a Collingwood. And I got that thing, and I've had a journey with that cymbal, learning it. And Dave just sent me one that's like really weird and not weird all at the same time. Like, he called it the trash ride or something when he put a video up of it. But I got it, and it's got these, like, it's a pretty low profile. It's got these massive hammer strikes. He must have been hammering into wood, just like these huge, like, really all over the place. It's got some areas that like dip in a little bit. It's got some zones. If I was to really lay in, it gets a little hummy. But it's got the most beautiful bell I've ever seen on a hand formed, you know, beautiful bell. And I got that cymbal, pulled it out of the box, hit it, was like, I love it. Instantly, I was like, I love it. Then over the next months, I was like, I don't know about this cymbal. Like, I don't know if it necessarily fits me. Then I took it to a jazz gig, and then I went, oh, okay. I kind of see what this thing can do. Then I took it to a rock and roll gig where I was just like slamming on the bell, going to town, and I went, okay, now I'm starting to understand it. And it was like this evolution that took place of me learning this cymbal that Dave made for me. Like, my wife, it was a surprise that my wife got for me for my birthday last year or 2 years ago, maybe. And so Dave made it kind of like, I don't know how much intention he put into the cymbal with me, but he gave me something that I love. And it's like, it's something that, like, on one hand, I wouldn't choose it for myself, but on another hand, it's like, it's like a part of my arsenal that I'll never get rid of, you know? And I like that approach. I like that way of approaching the instrument, of approaching cymbals. It's like, it's a relationship. It's a two-way street. You learn what it can do, what it can't do, and then it fills a space within your arsenal. And so, you know, like, if I'm doing this type of gig and it's in this type of environment, I'm going to go for that cymbal because I know it does this thing really well. And that as opposed to the idea of like the holy grail perfect cymbal that does everything.
Yeah.
Because to me, the more versatile a cymbal is, the more boring it is. You know?
Kinda, yeah. I see
that,
that.
but
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah.
As at the extremes, right? At the extreme, most versatile, kind of meh. I don't know. And the more funky something is, the more unique, but also the more unusable it is. You know what I mean? Like it, and so everything lives in that spectrum. And we want to make some sometimes really funky cymbals with weird shapes, and like sometimes those are like exactly what you need for a really particular vibe. But sometimes you need something clean,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then it's like the fact that there's no right answer makes this art form even more just exciting.
Or exciting for sure. A good combination between exciting and I would say frustrating.
Yeah.
Both simultaneously. And we just happen to be the ones that are down to like take the frustration and keep on going. I feel like to do certain things you really have to, like, going back to the idea of how life moves one way or the other, and why we're here, and why music, or why cymbal smithing now, and if it is somehow meaningful, and I do think it is very meaningful. I kind of lost my track of my thought. What did you say just before?
We were talking about versatility, talking about like the more versatile, the more boring, the more funky, the more unusable, and the spectrum. And there's a lot of places you could go. My brain just kind of is like,
my brain is fried. Woo! because of like whoever is listening. It's been over a week of like constant screen time, which I usually do at night before sleeping or something, but which I know is not healthy, so whatever. But like this website took a chip out of me. But I guess I just wanted to say something about sound, or something related to sound, and how this idea that, and I put it on the website, so I almost don't even want to say it. It's like this idea of bad sound versus good sound. Like the idea of that there's no bad sound. There's only something that bad and good only refer to whatever the context that you are in is. And again, it has a lot to do with like subjectivity and things that we know, because it's quite obvious after you grow up. But yeah, I don't know. You said something and my brain went somewhere, and I forgot about it.
Honestly, that's
sorry.
I feel like that's a perfect way of like sort of wrapping up, like because we are kind of dancing around this idea that there are no good sounds and bad sounds. There's just sounds. And so what connects with you is what connects with you. And at the end of the day, that's like, we're talking about as makers, like we're making what inspires us. And so we make it, we put it online, and we say, like, if you like this, you can buy it. Or if you want me to make you something else similar, you can buy it. It's vulnerable. But we're also, in a sense, just kind of, we're coming against this whole idea that like everything has to be mass produced and everything has to be the same. And you know, it's all this like selling what your favorite drummer plays. And so you're going to buy what your favorite drummer plays. And so you're going to sound just like your favorite drummer if you buy this cymbal. And it's like, no, we're kind of coming at it from a different perspective. That's like, it actually takes, like you said earlier, it takes, do what you need to do to be proficient, and then spend a lot of time working on your emotional life and being a strong person, maybe not strong. Strong is not even the right word, but like someone confident in who you are, you know, like solid. That's a good way of putting it. Solid.
Yeah.
You know, like being yourself, not giving into trends, you know, discovering what you don't know. I feel like that could be like the tagline for this whole podcast. It's like, I'm just here to discover what I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's the same with all of us. We're doing that, and we're also presenting that. as a way of going about it. And like everybody that's our favorite artists or favorite cymbal smiths or favorite musicians, those guys, like more often than not, those guys did that for themselves. You know, like they put aside trends, they put aside what people told them they should do. And they
Maybe
just
they
went
were
out.
just unable to not do what, like, as the whole
Yeah.
thing. They just couldn't not do it.
Yeah, they could not do it. They, you know, maybe they weren't good enough to do what was expected of them. And so they just forged their own path. They just did what made them happy. Not what made them happy, what made them fulfilled, what gave them meaning in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And then they landed where they landed. So it's like,
Yeah,
I feel like if it's good enough for them, you know, good enough for us peons.
exactly.
So, all right. So tell us where we can find your cymbals.
Yes.
Website just now launched. I'll get this edited pretty quick and we'll go ahead and post it so that hopefully we can get some people coming there and checking out the stuff you got
Cool.
going on. So yeah, let us know.
Yeah, the website is literally as same as the Instagram. Everything that I have related to this workshop is called the same. Is Quijano Cymbals. It's with a Q and a U. The Spanish way of writing that sound is Quijano, and then the word cymbals, and you can find it on Instagram. Facebook is pretty inactive at the moment, but I'm gonna try to link it up. And now the website as well, quijanocymbals.com. And that is where you can find pretty much everything that I've done so far and anything that I'm going to do in the future. I do have, for whoever is interested or whoever, it's plain on the website anyway. I shouldn't be even saying it, but it's free shipment inside Europe and like a couple of flat rates worldwide. So it's a bit more accessible to people that are trying to get them as well. So yeah, that is pretty much.
Awesome. Mariano, thank you. Honestly, this might have been one of my favorite conversations, if not my favorite conversation. I felt like we went into some therapy.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
We went there.
I am very. I'm not lonely because I'm not. I have friends, but I'm very lonesome. In my crevice of activity and sharing with people like me, like you, etc. Like this is so fulfilling. So
oh yeah,
I enjoyed it very much.
Every time I get off a podcast like this, I'm always like on a high, and I just ride that high for like a week and make a bunch of cymbals, and it's just a lot of fun. So I really appreciate you being a part and giving
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'll definitely look out for your stuff and check out the website, and I'll link all that stuff too in the description and all that. But yeah, comment below. Let us know what you thought about the conversation. Keep an eye out for the next episode of the Reverie podcast. I'm Timothy Roberts. Catch you next time.